Welcome to Ceramics with Sheriff. I decided to do this one outside because it's a beautiful day, but we're going to be going over a relief tile today. So, the way I want to start with you guys is I'm going to roll out a 3/4 inch slab, so it has to be extra thick to be able to do this. I want to have my sketch done, and what I did was I made a copy and simplified my sketch, and then I traced it with a Crayola marker. And because they're water-based markers, if I get this clay wet enough and I push this on there, it's going to stamp in almost like a temporary tattoo. So I'm going to start with that. In order to get my slab ready and smooth, I'm going to take one of my ribs and I'm just going to smooth that clay out so that I'm nice and ready and everything's even. Kind of compress that clay a little bit. I'd like to thank my sponsor, Dutch Brothers, for this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sponge, just a little bit wet so there shouldn't be any water coming out, and I'm going to kind of drag it across the clay to get it nice. We don't want it wet, but we want it sticky. And then I want to kind of line up my drawing, so if I would have thought about this better, I would have cut the edges off. And I'm carefully going to smooth that on there. And then same thing, I'm going to take the sponge with almost no water in and kind of drag it across the back. If you do this too much, the paper is going to get wet and rip, so you only want to do it a little bit. And then if this worked, I should be able to peel my paper off and my design should be on there, like so. So I'll hold it up so you guys can see. So you can see my designs on that paper there. Sorry, my design's on the clay. And then what I'm going to want to do is take a nice straight edge or a ruler, and I want to cut straight lines across the sides. So I got my tools I'm going to need here. I have a fettling knife, a rib, sponge, wooden knife for details, and then a couple different carving tools and a needle tool. So I'm going to carefully slice this. Now, one of the keys to this is keeping this slab as flat as possible. If I keep moving it around and picking it up, clay has memory, so if I keep bending this edge this way, it's going to want to dry that way. So what I'm going to do is once I get started, I'm going to take a bag and cut it open and then put my piece in the bag. So when I have to work on it, I'm going to keep it on this wooden board. I'm just going to open up the bag and close the bag. So I'm going to finish cutting this. Now I have a good base for my tile. So I should have straight edges. You can see how thick this slab is, but I now have my design on there. And I'm going to walk you guys through my thought process on how to decide what I'm going to carve out, where I'm going to start, and what pieces that I'm going to add on to this. So hopefully that's a little better and closer so you guys can see my designs here. But I want to decide which parts of this design that I want to carve out, which parts I want to leave kind of flat like the clay, and which parts I want to add on. So the whole point of relief tile is creating depth with a flat piece of clay. So instead of adding pieces like I would on a sculpture, and the reason we start with a 3/4 inch slab is because I'm going to take away a lot of this clay, especially in the background parts of the design. So you want to have multiple layers, so a foreground, midground, background. So my closest thing that's going to stick out is going to be my foo dog's face. And then I'm going to add on his necklace just as really thin pieces. And then the parts that go back, like his belly and the back legs, I'm going to carve back just a tiny bit. in order for that three-dimensional vibe to come out of this. So my main tools I'm going to use are my loop tool here. I'm going to use this little hook tool and this tool to start. I'm going to do mine all at once, but you guys probably want to draw with your needle tool over the marker lines, because as it sits in the bag, they're going to disappear, and if moisture gets on them, you might lose your lines. So you probably want to carve them on first so that they're there permanently. But what I'd also like you guys to do is along the edge, carve about a 1/2 inch border, or draw a 1/2 inch border on there. It was totally crooked, so make sure you measure yours before you do. So that border is going to allow a sturdier exterior to help this from warping and bending when it's drying. Because there's all those different levels, it's going to be a little bit difficult for it to dry all at the same pace. So we really have to take our time when drying it. But this border I found helps a lot. And on the front of it, I'm going to make his feet kind of stand out of the border, so it almost looks like he's coming out of the picture frame. I think that'll look pretty cool. So where I'm going to start then? I'm going to start carving away at this background. So all these little swirls in here, I'm going to start carving away and removing clay. So pretty much the whole background I'm going to take out right now, maybe to about half the thickness of my whole slab. So I'm just going to drag it along that border I just made. And I just want to make sure I don't go into my design, because then I'll have to add clay back there. So I'm just kind of going along the edge. As you start, you don't really have to worry about making it look perfect, because I'm going to smooth this part out later, but I still have carving to do there, so it's not a big deal. I just want to kind of get a good start and start removing this clay. So the loop tool is pretty cool because you can see that pretty even chunk I took out of there. So basically what I do is I stick it in this way. So I push it down and then I keep it straight and just drag it. Now you guys want to make sure you don't carve out too much, otherwise your slab is going to be extremely thin in that space. And the thinner it is, the more problems you're going to have. We can always add clay back in, it's not a big deal, but I don't want to carve too much to start. So let's see, get rid of that. So almost like a drawing, I'm kind of blocking it in. And I'll worry about details later. My next step I want to do is the tricky part. So the parts that I want to fade back into the background just a little bit, like maybe his hair, or maybe the stomach of his body, I want to carefully carve away just a little bit. So his legs are the things I want to be in the front because that's what would stick out the most. So I'm going to come in here and just lightly carve stuff away. Alright, one thing I want to show you guys, so you can see how sloppy this looks right now. It's because the clay is super soft, so I can't get super fine details because everything's so mushy. But I carved in these legs here so that they kind of bevel in and come out. I carved this cavity in here because that's where his stomach would be. This is a part that's dangling from his necklace, so I'm going to leave that out there. And I carved away this part in his feet. I carved away a little bit back here. So this is part of his hair that's going to come out, but this is back where his neck would be. And then inside the mouth, you guys have to think, so because this clay is super soft, I'm going to let it get to leather hard before I start doing all the major details in there. But I can smooth it out a little bit. But you have to think, if this is his mouth right here, right? And he has teeth. I know it's probably hard for you guys to see, but let's see if I can get a better angle. I cut his teeth back so that they're inside of the mouth. They're not sticking out at the same level. Because I want to create depth, that's something that would be important to me. So, what I wanted to show you is with this little guy, in order to get his nose to stick out and me not having to add a nose, I'm going to take this little hook tool, and this is what I've kind of been doing the whole time. Right along that line, I'm just going to kind of push it in. And then use the hook tool to smooth it out. But what that does is it pushes the clay in, but then it makes the nose pop out and gives me that like angled bevel in there, which creates that layer of depth. So it's a tiny, tiny little difference in the clay. So here I'm going to do this side again. But I'm just going to push it in, and I'm going to kind of do that around the nose. And because the slab's so thick, it's super easy to do this. I'm going to smooth it out and smooth the edge of the nose out. But what that allowed me to do is get that nose to start to peek out in 3D and look like it's popping out of the face. Here's a little better view of where I'm at next. So I cut out the eyes, the mouth, I blocked in the hair. So I got the hair here too. I carved out the chest and this space of his neck. I decided instead of adding on the necklace here, I know you guys can see how it's pushed in here. So because the slab is so thick, it's really easy to just press the clay down with your finger instead of carving it away sometimes. And then one of the things I wanted to talk about before I stop for now, because if you guys can see my face, it looks all beat up. Because my clay is super soft, and then I have a sandy clay unlike yours, so I'm getting all these little boogers and grit. So I need to wait till that clay kind of dries out to leather hard for me to get my details done. But to create some more depth, you guys can see along here. I'm gonna get rid of this part just so you can see. That line I put around the outside of this hair here, and I'll do it again. Focus. Gives me another layer of depth that makes it look like it's going back a little bit farther. So I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna let this dry for maybe a day, and then I'll post up another video on how I finish up my details and maybe add any exterior pieces on here. I'd really like to get this face a little bit more detailed, but I really have to wait until that clay is firmed up. Otherwise I'm just gonna keep kind of scratching it away, like you can see this eye here where it's all boogered up. So you guys want to focus on doing that. Same thing goes for the background. I smoothed that out, but I'm gonna wait till that's a little bit firmer. But to create depth, we don't want my animal to have square shoulders. So after I carved that out, I came around here with my hand and kind of smoothed those spaces out. And it gives me the illusion that that's going back a little bit farther. So I can drag my finger here, it pushes that back, and then I'm just going to take the needle tool and add that line back so I get that layer of depth again. So I'm going to smooth this out, and then it's just going to dry up a little bit. And then these parts I'm going to add on, and there's a necklace part here that's getting added on, but that's pretty much it. So focus on taking away what goes away the farthest first. So this background is my first step, and then I kind of removed parts from the arm just a little bit, just to get them to sit back a little bit farther. So you can see how they sit under here. And then I blocked in the face and the details. So these I might have to add on, especially the eyes. If they end up getting too nasty from all these little boogers and me carving them too early, I might just add them back in later. But I'm going to go around and smooth everything else out, and then all the little hairlines and details I'm going to add later. And the teeth, I want to be careful with the teeth and stuff that's small so that I don't break it. But other than that, that's the start. So one more thing I was talking about, when I was talking about pushing the clay back to get depth, so these are his claws here. This one's all the way down the bottom, so I'm not going to worry about that one too much. but this one's on top of the ball. And I've kind of rounded, there we go, rounded the edges of this ball because it's like a sphere to give me the illusion that it's round, but right now I'm very flat and two-dimensional there. So I'm going to take the little hook tool and right along those pieces, I'm just going to push in. And it's going to give me that little extra bit of depth on there, and it creates a shadow, especially now because I'm sitting outside in the light. That shadow really helps to kind of give you that idea that that claw is on top of that ball, so you guys can see the difference it made. So I'm going to do this last one right here. And now, without adding clay or taking any away, I have this idea that that claw is on top of the ball. Now I still have to go in and smooth it out, and honestly this has been my favorite tool to do it with, or a little wooden, one of the wooden needle tools, the little kebab sticks would work really well too, because I can just kind of drag it along there and smooth it out, and then the rest I'm just going to smooth out with my hand if I can reach it. It's just those hard to reach spots really make a challenge. And then the edge of these nails I'm just going to go over and smooth. And you can see a difference how finished that one looks versus these. So you just kind of round the edges with your hand. Take your time. The little details are what matters and makes these pieces stand out. So I'm going to go in with the needle tool there. Now that one stands out more too. And I'm just going to smooth over the top and the edges. And then I'll come back up here and I'll work on getting that part finished up too. And then I'll push it back this way to get it out of the way. Alright, and same thing with those little drop shadows and those little lines I was talking about. I can take this little tool, just put a little line there with my needle tool, and it might even give me that an extra layer of separation between the two, which gives me that extra shadow.